During past years, though, this is an important ritual at school. This year's speaker is well known to you. And because she's well known to you, you know that Robin Workman possesses extraordinary academic credentials and is a master teacher. She's a respected instructor in multiple departments: Mandarin Chinese, humanities, history, social studies. She serves on the Discipline Council. She was a major force in the recent rewriting of the school's philosophy. And she brings a very powerful ethical lens with her to school. So the students, members of the class of 2012, nominated her. She accepted, and then the task for me was to figure out how to introduce her. So in the vague style, I gathered a group of 6 members of the class around my table. Some of you know on the wall I have a whiteboard. In about 20 minutes, it was filled with suggestions about introduction. We had to go through the process of whose idea would prevail. And this group selected 2. One is a quote from a former student who was in a philosophy class last year. She wrote in her journal, "Ms. Workman challenged me to think more deeply and to write more courageously than I ever was able." Another agreement was around a quotation from one of her famous philosophers, which I guess are many, Viktor Frankl. This quotation says, also posed by a member of her class, "The point is not what we expect from life, but rather what life expects from us." It's a privilege for me to introduce Robin Workman.
That was a very apt introduction. I think that when you hear my speech, you'll realize how apt it is. Wow. Before I start, I just have to say my favorite, speaking of philosophers, my favorite philosopher out there, Camus. At the age of 43, I couldn't help myself. I had to start with Camus. At the age of 43, he received the Nobel Prize for Literature, and I just turned 43 a month ago. And this has to be the greatest honor in my life and the equivalent of my Nobel Prize. So and just for clarification, I am not a member of the board, and I didn't mean to stand up earlier in the introduction. I was trying to give the board a standing ovation to thank them for giving me a job. But I digress. Members of the board, Tim Johnson, esteemed colleagues, families, parents, alumni, students, and most importantly, the fabulous graduating class of 2012. In the philosophy classes I've been so fortunate to teach at Bay, I ask my students to convene in small discussion groups that I call petits salons, much to the horror of my French relatives. When the seniors asked me to be their graduation speaker, the first thing I did, well, after a series of major panic attacks, was convene many imaginary petit salon sessions with my favorite philosophers. So, any advice you hear from me today or any words of wisdom is merely a product of those sessions with those brilliant minds that inform the way I strive to live. In Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, he recounts his experiences in Auschwitz and how that time in a concentration camp both shaped his development as a human being, but also as a psychiatrist. In the second half of his book, Viktor Frankl articulates the following idea. The meaning of life always changes, but it never ceases to be. We can discover the meaning of life in 3 different ways. 1, by creating a work or doing a deed. 2, by experiencing something or encountering someone. And finally, 3, by the attitude we take towards unavoidable suffering. As I revisited this passage, I was struck by how elegantly Dr. Frankl had communicated the message that I hope to impart to you today. so I will structure my speech accordingly. About creating a work or doing a deed. When creating a work or doing a deed, take to heart Simone de Beauvoir's observation that in order to justify our existence, we all feel an undefined need to transcend ourselves. When choosing your work or deed, find projects that sustain you and fulfill you. Find something you're passionate about and get lost in it. Invest yourself fully in those things that make your heart sing. And enjoy. This is very important. Enjoy the rewards of your accomplishments. If you don't know where your passions lie, pay attention to those things that capture your interest, make you feel just a little bit more alive, or enable you to transcend yourself. When I chatted with those of you who absolutely loved your senior project, the common denominator was passion. Because you found passion in your projects, you worked hard and you surpassed your own self-set limits. Your hearts sang. As you move into the next phases of your life, continue to seek passion in everything that you do. But, and this is also mucho importante, clearly I am not a Spanish teacher. Allow yourself time to breathe, and if you need help with that, I'm a master at breathing after this morning. Allow yourself time to breathe and partake in the joys and pleasures of life. Remember, we are a very delicate composite of pleasure and meaning-seeking beings, and we cannot deny either part of our natures. So, as I often told you as sophomores when you were full of monkey business in sophomore humanities, work hard, play hard, but take care of biz first, do your Mandarin homework first, do your humanities homework first, and play responsibly. And if you need some help with that, I've got some tips. My second point, or Dr. Frankl's second point about experiencing something or encountering someone. In his essay, Self-Reliance, the great American philosopher and abolitionist Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "It is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after one's own. But the great man, or great woman, is she who in the midst of the crowd keeps the perfect sweetness of solitude." I have taken this to mean that in order to skillfully navigate the world, we need to first encounter ourselves and discover who we are in solitude. Solitude enables us to engage in dialogue with ourselves, and yes, contrary to popular belief, talking to yourself is the greatest sign of sanity. Being comfortable with ourselves in solitude is a very crucial foundation for emotional well-being. In our fast-paced world of high-speed internet connections and instant gratification, it is increasingly difficult to find time to nurture ourselves. So, seniors, I encourage you to unplug, and I really mean this, every now and then unplug, turn off your iPhones, and stop, if this is possible, stop tweeting about me. Even for just a few hours. You can plug back in later and start tweeting again. Only after we've learned to live with ourselves are we able to forge meaningful relationships with others. And I think this is what Frankel means by encountering someone as a very important pathway to making meaning. Find soulmates who mirror who you are, yet at the same time give you perspective and hold you to a higher standard. Build relationships that are lasting and allow you to flourish to your full potential. Which brings me to my third point about the attitude we take towards unavoidable suffering. In the Prophet, Kierkegaard says that the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. And this has certainly been the case for me. You may have suffered the pangs of breakup, friends talking smack about you, divorce, or maybe your parents not seeing the world in the same way. But hopefully, most of you have not had to suffer in the ways that you may in the next stages of your life, when you may face injustice, disappointment, or loss. However, out of those challenges, you will be presented with your greatest opportunities for growth and expansion as human beings. If you can truly own that suffering and embrace it, you will gain a more lucid awareness of what really matters. And you will have yet another opportunity to transcend yourself. My dear friend Stephanie passionately pursued her own project, a PhD in political philosophy from Georgetown and a life of the mind. Just as she completed her dissertation, she was diagnosed with a terminal illness. While Stephanie's suffering was unavoidable, she had a choice between victimization, or as Camus would say, to revolt against the inevitability of death. At every turn, Stephanie revolted with dignity, integrity, decency. She was my greatest teacher. If I can presume to add a fourth point to Viktor Frankl's Pathways meeting, of course, I just couldn't help myself. I must add a little bit of Confucian wisdom. 三人行，必有我师. And if any of the Mandarin students want to take a tackle at that, 6 characters to so elegantly say what it takes many, many words in English, and hopefully you'll realize this is why Chinese is a superior language. Anyway, the translation is, when I walk among 3, among them there must be my teacher. And I would add that it's not just everyone, but it is everything that is that it is every experience, no matter how painful or joyous, that is a potential teacher. So I've developed a consciousness that in every situation and in every interaction, there's always someone or something to help you become better than who you were prior to that moment. It is up to us to be present to those moments, present to those opportunities to learn and grow, which is precisely why I'm a teacher at the Bay School. You, and I mean you too, the students at Bay, are so often my potential teachers. No, strike that. You are so often my teachers. What sustains me in this profession is the wisdom and insight you impart to me every day when you look at the world with fresh eyes and thoughtfully engage with one another. Graduates, I have observed you in a range of settings, even those of you I have not taught. In the classroom, in the community, in your interactions with your teachers, where you have modeled thoughtful, respectful dialogue and elevated discourse that very few adults in this country are capable of. Even in your final morning meeting, where you expressed appreciation to your teachers, modeling gratitude for your underclassmen. Oh, and this is also très importante, even in your most awesome senior prank yesterday. That was the best senior prank ever. And juniors, I do not want to burst your balloon, but the bar is set very high for you next year. We'll talk. These observations mirrored everything that you have been taught over the course of your Bay education, which is really quite magical when we live in a culture where shoving matches all too often stand in for thoughtful engagement. Now, if that is what the Bay School has taught you, My only wish is for you to hold fast to that wisdom as you leave the world your parents and we have provided for you, to enter into a world that you will thoughtfully refashion and reinvent by creating with passion, living intentionally, and inspiring by example. I am so proud of you guys. You have come a long, long way. Congratulations.
Wow.